I'm so fucking proud of that.
Every time.
He's done.
Lost him already.
There he is.
Hey guys, welcome to Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit, and we've got a big one tonight, and we're excited. Or it's morning where these gentlemen are, and they're over in one is in Ireland and one is in Scotland. So we've got Mark Reynier, Waterford.
Yep, hi.
In Edinburgh, and we've got Ned Gahan from Waterford, and you're in Waterford. G'day, guys.
G'day.
Hello, guys. How are you going?
Hello.
Well, this is a big one, and this has been one that we've wanted to do for a long time. Slight change, because we were actually going to have a local craft maltster on, Voyager Craft Malt, but unfortunately, due to an injury, they can't make it. But
Hi, Stu.
yeah, g'day, Stu.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Hopefully he's off on the sideline.
we have 100% Waterford, and we're going to be talking all things Waterford, all things whiskey terroir, and other things. So, yeah, guys, thank you for this. It's very difficult to put these things together with everyone for reasons we all know, and everyone's moving around. And Mark, you've been over in the US just recently.
Yeah, I got back yesterday. So yeah, it's a whirlwind tour. America, New York, Dallas, Chicago, Boston. So
Wow.
it was quite a trip.
Getting around. Is that all?
Yeah,
business or
I mean, it's
pleasure?
a big place. It's 50 countries in one. So all with their own regulations and their own rules, and so it's we're putting a lot of attention into getting it right in America, and I mean it's a long process.
And what's the general feedback that you're getting so far? How is the US market responding to Waterford as a whole and as a?
Oh, it's an interesting point, because as you know, Irish whiskey has been defined as being Jameson's. Pernod Ricard had a monopoly, for 25 years. So really, it's synonymous. Irish whiskey is Jameson's. Jameson's is Irish whiskey. So when you come along with a different proposition altogether, we're doing single malt only. It's a different ball game. And of course, there's also this thing about which way Irish whiskey leans, and the vast majority of it leans towards bourbon, and some of it leans towards Scotland, and of course that's sort of where we are leaning, being single malt only. So that's the background. So Irish whiskey, the company, James has blazed the trail. And boy, have they done it a good job. The simple thing is, in Scotland, 80% of Scotch whiskey is made by 5 companies, and in Ireland it's by 1. 80% is by 1. So one shouldn't forget just the immense work that's Pernod Ricard, Irish Distillers, has done. And of course, we're coming along with a different proposition, that's based on terroir, single malt whiskey. And then you look at the distribution mechanisms in America. As I said, each state is different. You go to Texas, and it's got a 4-tier system. You go everywhere else, it's a 3-tier system. Some of this is, it goes back to the mob, and it goes back to the days of prohibition and religious reasons, and teetotalism, and we always go on about America being land of the free.
Far from it, from what I believe.
Fool me. And then on top of that, the bit I find the most thrilling, the most rewarding, is when we came of age at 3, it was the day before lockdown, Went to America, all terribly excited, and of course everybody told us to get lost. and then now, sort of, now that's changed. Now those guys, the very same people that said, no thanks, have come back and, well, we might have been a bit hasty. So I think in America there is a realization that the what's made them so big and so great, the pile 'em high, big brands. There is a thirst for something real, something authentic.
Hold on. Oh, you just ruined it.
And that's.
I wanted to.
Where we come in.
Before he ruined it, I just want to do a little quiz with you quickly. Which bottle have we opened?
You want me to tell you? Biodynamic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
There
win
you
nothing.
We
Well,
seem
sorry to
to
interrupt.
send them in.
In fairness, guys, with the biodynamic, I think you're going to be the winners.
Well, indeed.
3 years, 2 months, and a day old whiskey, and it packs a punch way above that. I think
Mm,
Yeah, no, it's
age
delicious.
is relative,
Yeah.
quality is
Oh.
everything.
absolutely. See, I get from the range of that I've had so far, just a butteriness is the best way that I can describe it. Waterford for me is buttery. It's got that oily, viscous, softness to it that I can only describe as butter. I fucking love
Well,
butter.
I mean, that's a perfectly fine observation. Barley, that unctuousness that you're getting on the bouquet, the nose, it's barley, because of the way we mill it anaerobically. And then on your palate, that butteriness, the gras, as the French wine term is, that oiliness, that richness comes from the trickle distillation. Slow it all down during distillation, slow the whole thing down, and you get unctuous spirit. I mean, Ned will tell you more. When you see it come out of the spirit safe, you can see it sort of glooping out because you've got all that richness of alcohol. Trickle distillation, slow it down, and that's what you get. On top of that, we've got things like during the fermentation, we have, as you know, a sort of 7-8 day fermentation, thermoregulated for intensity of flavor. But that also gives us the chance to get, and I believe we're the only people that do this, a malolactic fermentation.
Right.
And that's where the harsh malic acid is converted into softer lactic acid. And I think that's probably also got something to do with that mouthfeel that you're
Interested on that point, Mark. The biodynamic, that biodynamic whiskey is the longest fermentation at 194 hours.
there you go.
So if you're doing that in another distillery, I'd get sacked. Neither gets sacked.
Well, so it's a very good point. The fermentation is something I've always, ever since the 80s, the 90s, when I saw thermoregulation, happening, being introduced into Burgundy, which is something very close to me, and of course they learned it from you guys in Australia and California. I'd always thought, well, why don't we do this with whiskey? And the normal fermentation, I hasten to add, is in those large Douglas fir fermenters, and the actual, the wood itself acts as a sort of thermal blanket. It sort of allows the temperature to be absorbed as it rises during fermentation, and then to sort of lend it back as it cools down. So it's provided a sort of thermal effect, but the long and short it is the temperature is the fermentation is controlled by ambient temperature. One of the reasons Scotland, Islay, where I've been, Brookladdy, that sort of 2-day fermentation, 60 hours, more or less, is determined by that, by the ambient temperature. You know, the winter summer temperature. There's barely 5 degrees between the two. Industrial fermentation, you know, the big boys, well, they want to speed it up. They want it over and done with. You know, time is money. They want it over and done with as quickly as possible. So very simply, they put double the amount of yeast in. It's called a high density fermentation. And the thing goes off like a rocket, and it's all over in a day. Well, and then there's a third way, which is you cool that temperature rise. And we're only talking 5 degrees, you know, 28 to 32, 33. It's only a small temperature rise, but a bit like a surfer. If you can ride that, if you can prevent it going too high too quick, or the contrary, collapsing and going too cold, in which case your fermentation stalls. You know, if you can ride that like a surfer, if you can ride that wave, you can extend it out longer and longer and longer, and that gives you this intensity of flavor that comes from an extended thermo-regulated ferment. And we've got all the space, we've got all the fermenters, so you know, why not?
So how many different? Sorry, Ned, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I'm interested in the biodynamic as well as from my head anyway. The nose is a bit fruitier and the taste is spicy. Yeah. So what you'll find is on a lot of our whiskies, you'll have two experiences. You'll have the smell and the taste. And sometimes, you know, when you have a whiskey and the nose and the taste follows a pattern. On a lot of our whiskies, they don't. On every one of our whiskies, I'd say they don't. You have a kind of a spice, plum and apricot kind of a nose, fruity nose, and then on the taste and on the biodynamic, as far as I can remember, there's a nice bit of spice up front which you're not expecting. So you're getting a lot of contrast, and you're getting a lot of even complexities on that. Like, and as well with the biodynamic, you have a lot of that fresh soil coming through as well because of the root structure of it as well.
It's very true. And of course, the bouquet and the taste, you know, as Ned is inferring. But, you know, the bouquet, the aromatic side of it, well, what happens there? It's activated by air. It's activated by water. It's activated by time. So you know, give it those three things. Like great wine, give it time in a glass, and this thing performs. And the more flavors there are in the biodynamic, the greater that experience is.
So how much time should we give that in the glass?
I mean, that's how long is a piece of string? You know, it's if you opened a bottle of Chateau Latour, you don't sort of put on a timer. You know, it does its thing. It depends on the temperature. The warmer it is, the faster it will evolve. And of course, we've got the added thing of water. If you add a drop of water to it or more, that is also activating that aromatic profile. The flavor group known as the aldehyde flavor group are hydrated by water. And I'm a great advocate. I mean, more so than Ned, I'm a great advocate of adding water to my dram, to my whiskey, not only to activate that aromatic profile, but also to dilute the alcohol. You know, we bottle everything at 50%.
Yeah.
Wanting you to dilute it down. You know, we've diluted it already from cask strength to 50. And we're then saying, well, okay, now you take it down to the strength you like, depending on the mood you're in and who you're with and which whiskey it is. So that you can, you know, because these are natural whiskies, because there's nothing in it that shouldn't be there, you can add water very safely. Cool water if you want from the fridge, you know. That's not a problem. Better than ice, and you can dilute it down to where you like it to be. And I think you know this tyranny of you know should you or shouldn't you add water? I think it's a no-brainer. You got to add water. The question is how much. A teardrop. That's the minimum. That's the minimum to activate those flavor compounds, or as much as you like. Sometimes I add as much as 50%.
Oh wow!
You're only diluting you're only diluting the alcohol because Ned has put these together so well, so intrinsically knitted. And there's nothing there that shouldn't be there. Remember, we have the ingredients on the back of the label. It's yeast, barley, and water. That's all it should be. Well, that's all it is in this case. So because your brain isn't sort of going, well, hey, what's that doing there? Your brain isn't being sort of, sort of tricked by additives of whatever sort. That harmony, that balance, is what makes it such an enjoyable drinking experience. And the adding of water is you're not breaking it. That's the important thing. Is you're not breaking
and just at the 50% water, we call that a morning dram.
That's your breakfast whiskey.
So Mark has his sales head on now. Add 50% water, and you can drink it before 12 o'clock.
Right. So have you got your 50-50 glass sitting there with you now, or?
I don't. No, I don't.
Now, I was going to say, so that spice that you were mentioning in the biodynamic in particular, I normally associate that with a French oak cask. So when I'm tasting a whiskey, I'll go, yep, all right. I reckon they've matured that in a French oak cask to get that level of spice.
So
that hasn't happened to you.
When the 4 cask types used in this are, off the top of my head now, the percentages might be right: 35% force fill, 17% virgin American, 26 French, and 22 VDN or Vin Natural, roughly. So that should be 100. But this will tie into the question that Ian is asking as well.
Fermentation,
So we did a terroir study, which basically had 2 plots, one in southeast of Ireland, Bunclody and Wexford, one in Midlands in Athy. And Dr. Dustin Howard from Oregon State University did it as a peer review paper in conjunction with Chagas, which is part of the Department of Agriculture, and Tacklock and Thompson in Scotland. So Bournemouth, our maltsters were also involved. And one of the things we found is we can attribute flavours like that to soil. Peer review paper, scientifically proven. So we have some soil series such as Clonroach, Elton, Seafield, and those different soil series gives different flavors. So we can say that a Seafield soil series has a little bit more fruitiness, fresh fruit. You could say that an Elton then has a bit more barnyard and clovey notes in that. So while you associate casks with different things, that's more so finishes, which we don't do. So they start in the cask. So when I'm putting the whiskey together, what I'm trying to do is bring together a balance so that the casks are obviously involved. They're very important for the microoxygenation and maturation. We have good spirit and good wood. That's why you're able to drink that at 3 years old. But what we're looking for is we're looking to promote or showcase the flavors of the farm.
It's harmony. It's about harmony. Yeah. Harmony is what we're looking for here. If you want to taste the wood, go and lick a tree. It's an awful lot cheaper. Yeah, it's an awful lot cheaper. So the art of what Ned is doing, putting these bottlings together, is that none of these things should whack you in the face. It's about harmony. It's about balance. And that's why every single farm, all 35, every single one goes into the same profile of wood right across the board. We've spent 8 million euros in wood because there is no shortcut. You need good wood. And not just, look at us, aren't we clever? We've got some fancy French barrels here, and then it's shit over there. It's right across the board. We have it for every single one. So 200 barrels per farm, roughly, correct me if I'm wrong, Ned, roughly half American, half French, roughly, okay? Everything goes up. So virgin American, virgin French. That's where we get the color from. And then first fill American, we get the creme brulee, the vanilliness, that sort of side of it, from the vanillins in the oak. And then the first fill French, which is where we get the spiciness from Allier, the Trancé, Vosges, Limousin forests. Each, different altitudes of forest, different grain of oak, different. And remember, American barrels are double the thickness. Sorry, French barrels are double the thickness of American. So you get an awful lot more bang for your buck with French oak. But you got to know how to use it. You got to know how to deploy it, because if not, it can dominate. It can be excessive, and then your harmony goes out the window. And then, of course, the final piece is the sucrosity, which comes from the VDN. It's a shorthand term we use, Vin du Naturel. It's a French term for fortified sweet wines, like sherry, port, Madeira, Banyuls, reed salt, etc. And that's where the oak plays a minor role. It's more to do with the sucrosity in the oak that, of course, the alcohol leaches out. And so, when we come to, so each farm has that same profile. So each farm in its own right is a standalone bottling. So when Ned comes to put one together, he's got all the ingredients there to make a balanced, harmonious bottling. And I can't stress harmony. If you buy a great wine, there's that wonderful balance between tannin, fruit, and acidity. And you shouldn't taste any one of them. It should be bang in the middle. And that's when your brain goes, yeah, I like that. That's singing. That's singing. As opposed to a discordant, or there's too much tannin, or there's too much fruit, or there's too much acidity. It's that harmony. And that's what we're looking for. And we've created the ingredients to do it. And so putting it together is precisely so that you don't taste any one of these things, that they come together in a harmonious way, which gives you a drinking experience where your brain's going, instead of your brain going, well, I'm not sure why that's there. There's something angular. This is a bit odd. Your brain's going, yeah,
nothing pointy.
This is all going fine. Now, poor old Ian, his question.
Ian, so asking, can fermentation times be changed for different varieties of grain or yeast?
Yeah, well, fermentation time, we don't time it. It's not, we play what's in front. So we're not saying it's got to be this number of hours or that number of minutes. No, we play what's in front of us. And this is what distillers do at Waterford. You play what's in front of us. And we have, thanks to Diageo, because remember, they built this extraordinary brewery, which Ned was involved in back in 2004, and which we converted or added to create the Waterford Distillery. At the heart of Waterford is we've got the most amazing fermentation facility, which is what a brewery is, and that's what the attraction to me was of it. We've got all the gadgets, all the kit that you'd never normally find at a distillery. And one aspect is data. Our distillers can see what's going on in real time. So hence, when it comes to extending fermentation, that surfer on the crest of the wave, they can see what's going on. And that gives us this control. So there aren't any specified times. So we play what's in front of us. And grains or yeasts, yeah, sure. We're only using barley, so I can't speak for anything else. And then as far as yeasts are concerned, we're using the same for everything, right across the board. Two yeast strains to give us a uniform approach, so that really it's the terroir talking. It's not a manipulation from something like yeasts or anything else.
Just to tie the grain back then to the terroir project, what we actually found is that the modern varieties of barley are very closely related. They're half brothers or sisters, or depending on what part of the world they're in, kissing cousins. But anyway, but there's very much goes back in the family tree. So that was quite interesting. So we decided then to start looking at older varieties. So the modern varieties had less of an impact on flavour than we anticipated. So Mark has shown up a bottle of Hunter, which is our youngest, oldest variety. And to just continue around the 50s, we have varieties from pre-1900 and around 1900, Goldthorpe, Sprat Archer, Old Irish, which are giving us much different flavors. The new make spirit of those are very, very different than the modern varieties that we have. And with the Hunter as well, I think it's that's a youngish whiskey as well, but packs a punch way beyond. Way beyond. And
I mean, it's quite shocking, wasn't it, to find when we did this study, the Terroir study. Yeah, sure, we discovered there were 2,000 flavor compounds. 2,000. You know, the industry thought there were 200. 2,000 flavor compounds, and we found that 60% of them were influenced by where the barley grows. 60%. Now, it's not rocket science. It makes sense. There are 10,000 wild strains of barley that have evolved over the last 15,000 years. When barley first started in the crescent in Mesopotamia, you know, Persia, Syria, where it first started there and then spread out. And of course, those varietals carried with them by farmers and the wind and birds and whatever, evolved in the environment that they found themselves, the terroir that they found themselves in. So roll forward, you know, to the 19th century, and you know, in Ireland there were, as elsewhere, there were wild evolutions, adaptions of we call them land races. They're called land races of barley, of which I believe 5,000 still exist in Ireland. And
that's a lot of different grain types, a lot of variations in such a relatively small area.
Well, it's because they've evolved in their terroir. You know, the soils, the humidity, the wind, the exposure, the heat, the warmth, the stoniness. You know, and the variables and the mutations. You know, are infinite. So what Hunter did was, this chap, Dr. Herb Hunter, is he was obviously very interested in these land races, and so he developed this strain of barley, and it was so successful in 1959 that it was actually named after him, which is very rare. And we were given access by the Ministry of Agriculture, Chagas. We were given access to their seed bank, because what we discovered during our terroir study, that, you know, 2,000 flavors, 60% of them influenced by where the barley grows. Great. You know, we knew that, but now we've got the proof. But the thing that Ned was referring to that shocked us was that the varietal didn't make any difference. We found that really weird. You know, how come the varietal doesn't make any? That doesn't make sense. And then when we dug deeper, we found that a rather sad story in the early 70s, round about 1973, when the whiskey industry was and the beer industry were looking for the ever greater efficiencies. They started to research how to make better barley. And of course, it was all about increasing the yield in the field, the yield in the still house, climate adaptability, disease resistance, all very noble, good things. But the one thing that they overlooked was the flavor. And we discovered that the parents from which all modern barley has been propagated, the parents selected for this whole research program for the last 50 years, those parents were cousins. They were genetically too similar. So that all that's happened in 50 years is we've replicated exactly the same flavor profile. And we found that just terribly sad. And so Chagas gave us access to their seed bank. We were able to take 50 grams. That's a sachet, one sachet of seed, half the existing stock of Hunter.
Wow.
And from that,
That's
over
pretty
4
trusting
years.
to give you that much of that little.
Well, correct. One sachet. So that one sachet, that 50 grams, after 4 years, ended up as 50 barrels.
Hmm.
Sorry, sorry about that. I don't know where you've gone. Where have you gone?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, there you go. So that 50 grams became 50 barrels after 4 years. And of course, you're into a different profile. It's got more grunt, it's got more oomph, it's got more texture. And you go, wow, look what we've been missing for 50 years. So it gets you all terribly excited to go backwards to find out what the hell have we been missing over the last 50 years. And just perhaps we can make our own Waterford barley from these old flavors and match it with modern barley to get those efficiencies of yield and growth. So I suppose there's a raison d'être, but fundamentally it's just to see a whole different flavor profile, and that's what's so exciting. I mean, if you got a distillery, let's use it.
Ned keeps sending them texts. Now, what's this one? What have we just opened?
I got one.
Well,
there.
it's a single farm.
Yeah.
So I can't identify the single farm because the Vinlock tops are color coordinated. So single farms are yellow, blue is organic, green is biodynamic. So I can't identify from that. But put it up and I'll have a smell of it and see can I tell you what it is.
Heritage.
Yeah.
Heritage. Yeah.
Have a crack. What are you? What are you getting?
I'm going to say is
I think it's very, for me, it's very grassy, very earthy, grassy, not as buttery, not quite as buttery for me. I'll make it easy for you.
Grattensbrook. Oh yeah. How did you get that one? Because that's I think I did. I think I bought it from the UK and had it shipped over. And because Grattensbrook is a UK exclusive. A farmer called Andrew Bergen, and Andrew is a conventional farmer. So we have conventional farmers, we have organic, biodynamic, and we have heritage farmers. But Andrew is very interesting actually because he writes articles on the Irish Farmers Journal, which is the national paper. And Andrew is a great example of a modern conventional farmer who's promoting soil health and is big into soil husbandry, and he's brilliant at that. So Andrew was actually the last farmer we distilled in 2016, in December 2016. He was farm 31, but he's very good, and the whiskey itself is very nice.
And very highly rated by Serge Valentin at Whiskey Farm, the most respected whiskey taster of the lot. Serge Valentin gave it 90.
Oh, thank you.
It is lovely, and I think I went on a bit of a hunt because it's been historically quite difficult to get any Waterford here in Australia. Thankfully, that is changing. But I went on a hunt and I found that, and I paid the Australia tax on it to get it into the country, and
so it doubled the price instantly.
It did double the price instantly.
Add more water, and you get the volume.
So I've been rationing it out, and I've got that much left. So, and I've had it. I don't know how long I've had it for now, but it'll be a sad day when I kill this bottle.
Have you entered the terroir code? Have you entered the terroir code on the back of the?
I haven't entered it on that one. No.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to do
but
that.
if you enter it on the website, it will give you all the detail, and you can meet the guy, and you can see where he's growing. And of course, the ultimate thing, which I loved, is you can listen. There's a sound file. So you can sit there with a dram and be carried back to where that barley was actually growing. Now, it's a fun thing to do, but there is a reason. It's because, and we hint about it on the front of the label. On the front of the label, it says there, it says produce of Ireland, not product, produce. Because remember, we all forget, it is an agricultural produce, not a manufactured product, an agricultural produce. And we want to remind you, it comes from the barley. The barley comes from the land. And we've shown you how different they are. The flavors are different. So remember, it's agricultural produce. And so listen to it. Sit there. Listen to the sounds of the farm, whether it's by the sea or up a mountain by a burn, or hear the crows or the tractors, or it gives you that sort of connection. That's what we do.
If I had set up my audio properly, I would play it through so everybody can get the experience. But what I'll probably do is I might actually put up my Terroir code so others can get in there and have a look at what we've been drinking.
There's an interesting experiment conducted by the James Hutton Institute with the use of rock on soils initiative applied to arable land, improving soil conditions. Yeah, James Hutton was a very famous. Have you read that there's a thing called James Hutton's Arse, which is a geological book about a very specific part of the geology of Scotland. It's quite amusing.
We'll take your word for it, Mark.
Yeah, that's it. Honestly, it's the title, yeah. James. I promise
Hutton's
you.
Arse.
I'm not Hutton's Arse. That's it. Yeah.
There you go. Now, Ian actually posted another question earlier. He's on fire with the questions tonight. Going back to the wood type and the barrels, in a stage of a different wood type, something to help marry together liquid during maturation.
Well, I mean, it's not something we're into. I know there are various people that have done these things, and it comes again from the wine world, where there's a lot of innovation in trying to amplify wood effect for minimal expense. And I have to say, I mean, one extreme of this is these maturation shortcuts, things like playing ultrasound, playing music, all sorts of things that have been tried and tested, and people swear by, and they all quietly fade away and disappear. As far as I'm concerned, it's a very, very simple base. It's very simple. And it's about good wood. You need good wood. That you've got to start the way you mean to carry on. Now, this plethora of finishing, this craze of finishing, it's become the verb, to finish. What's it finished in? What's yours finished in? The question people should really be asking is, what did it start in? And why is it being finished? Why? And the simple reason, unfortunately, is because it's in shit wood. And therefore, putting lipstick on a pig is the last resort. You could argue that the marketeers are going, well, hey, we've got one pipeline and we can have 5 products on the line. So there's a cynicism there too. And of course, that association of, oh, let's do something sexy that stands out and everyone goes, ooh, when really to take your attention away from the fact that for the last decade or whatever, it's been in manky old, tired, exhausted wood doing bugger all. Now, I learned this the hard way. I learned this, first of all, as an independent bottler, where you get to see the whole industry's dirty laundry. And it's industry wide, this issue since that industrial 73 era of distilling. And it's it's almost an existential problem. You can add to this, the fact that wood is becoming harder and harder to get good quality wood because of the demands, but also the reason why these barrels are all recycled. It wasn't originally, hands up. I think it was a problem forced on the industry, certainly in the UK and Ireland, back in that era of the 70s when their free run of barrels came to an end. And you remember, as an island, everything that comes to the UK and Ireland comes in a barrel, used to. So all the wines, the Bordeaux's, the Burgundies, the Rhones, the ports, the sherries came in barrels, were bottled at the ports, and then the barrels were got rid of to distilleries. And so, up until the early 70s, distilleries had, by default, a fantastic array of barrels to choose from and to use, free, more or less. But that all came to an end when those wineries started bottling at source for quality control. And then those barrels just didn't start turning up. They appeared in bottle instead of barrel. And that's when the industry was obligated to recycle the barrels. And the trouble is, I think they just got used to it.
So do you think that's going to become even more of a problem in the coming decades?
Yes, I do. I do think it's going to be a problem.
And how do you mitigate that?
Well, relationships and having and putting your hand in your pocket. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of newer distilleries, it's one of the easiest things to save money on. And as I said, these barrels are costing quite a bit. So the temptation is to use de-char, re-char, all sorts of shortcuts. Going back to the question about adding staves inside barrels. My feeling is that you got to bite the bullet, start the way you mean to carry on, I certainly learned that at Bruichladdich, was that we fell into that trap where we compromised on barrels, only to spend 7 years decanting everything that we had into better wood. So what goes on in a barrel is really a mystery. We know there's the extractive elements which happen when you've got fresh oak. The lignin, the vanillin, and the tannin. Yeah, those are extracted and then account for in a new barrel about 10% of the add to the existing barley flavors. But what's really going on, the most important thing, and of course, those initial ones are leached out very quickly. So use that barrel again a second time, and there's much less impact. Use it 3 or 4, and there's none whatsoever.
Yeah.
What is going on is, and it's far more important, is the micro-oxygenation of the barley flavor compounds. Now, this is really important. Barley, in that little grain, sitting on the top of a barley, that grain has got the 2000 barley flavor compounds. When we ferment and distill it, that appears, those exact same compounds appear in the new spirit. So what happens to those flavor compounds in the barrel to give you that maturation effect is micro-oxygenation. Day in, day out, 365, all the time. And
so to that end,
the fresher the barrel, the more you get. The mankier, the tireder the barrel, those pores are all blocked up. Think of it like a sieve. And if you sieve soil, and to start with, you get lots pouring through, which is great. But then as you keep sieving, it all gets blocked up, and the amount falling through gets reduced greatly. That's what's happening with a barrel. those wood pores, those oak pores are being blocked up. And so therefore the actual maturation effect is being retarded. So the older, the mankier the barrel, the slower the maturation is going to be. And we've all seen 30-year-old whiskies that are the color of dishwater, and seem like they're sort of 5 years old. They've been there doing bugger all. And that's why the finish becomes so important. Trying to do something to remediate the fact that it was in tired, uninspiring wood.
So Ian raises an interesting, I guess, point or a tangent on the whole aspect of terroir, the terroir of the oak itself, the species of the tree, where it's grown, the conditions it's been grown in, and then obviously the flavors that are going to come out from that, from the wood in those areas.
It's another level of terroir, isn't it?
It's another layer of
terroir. Every barrel is an individual.
Yeah.
Just because, we get our American casks, say, from Kelvin and Speyside cooperages. So when they're putting them together, each stave has its own characteristic. In France, where we get our virgin casks from Radu, they actually have a program where they can actually scan each stave and they grade them. And depending on what customers are looking for, they can give them different specific characteristics from the stave, so they can build the barrels for you. Yeah. So that's what the level that people are looking at now with staves. So each barrel is its own individual,
absolutely fascinating. And then of course the American ones, the whole aim, the Ozark Mountains, has been for conformity. So that's almost the opposite of what's happening in France. And you got the Vosges Mountains at altitude, and you got the Limousin forest, which is below sea level. Well, of course, those trees are going to grow differently. The warmth of the Limousin, they're going to grow faster, and the coldness of snow-capped Vosges Mountains, they're going to grow slower. So those are going to have a tighter grain, and the Limousin is going to have a more open grain. So you've already got and everything in between, the Allier, the Tronchet, Bertrange, these different. And remember, terroir. We've talked about this, before. Terroir applies to a plant, not a person, not a distillery, not a winery, not a region, a plant. It's what happens to the nature and nurture of a plant, whether it's a tree or whether it's a grain or a cereal. So don't forget, it's what happens to a plant, not a person or a distillery or a process or a whatever.
And the difference in the European and the American oak is, the American oak grows a lot quicker, maybe 80 years to maturity, whereas in France it's maybe 200 years. And with the American oak, you can quarter saw it. So actually, if anyone's interested, they could go onto our website and see we have videos done in France and America. But in America, you can quarter saw it, whereas in France, you actually have to split it and they have to turn it. And what happens is, the reason oak works as a vessel is that it can retain liquid, water, whiskey, whatever you want, But there's a thing called, if I don't know, I'll translate a rain medulla that runs across the grains that keeps the liquid in it, So in American oak, you can actually, it's quarter sawn, you can do it. You can get more staves from a tree. In France, you actually have to find it.
In a stave.
So you have to see where that rain medulla runs across the grain to keep it liquid tight. And so you actually get less staves from a French or a European tree.
American staves, exactly. Quercus alba, it's got, think of arteries with sort of fat in them, blocking them up. Well, that's what happens. They're called tyloses, and they block those the xylem and phloem that brings water and minerals up and down a tree. So that's what you got, these blockages. So think of it a bit like bamboo with those knots. it's what's happening. And so if you saw through American oak, you saw between two nodes, they don't leak. Whereas French oak, Quercus robur, pedunculate oak, doesn't have so many. And so if you saw through it, it's going to leak like a sieve. And so as Ned says, you have to split it. You split it along the grain. And that means inevitably that French oak ends up being 32 millimeters, 33, 34 millimeters thick versus 15 to 17 millimeters of American oak. American oak barrels, therefore, are lighter. That they are machine made. They are oven dried. It's all about volumes of these things. Remember, they're only used once, and then they're got rid of by law. So that's why they end up in for whiskey. Thank God. But you've got a very different philosophy with French oak, and remember we got Napoleon to thank for these forests. In fact, we've got Lord Nelson. Because Napoleon was going, Christ, where's my navy keep losing? My ships are getting trashed. He said, because our oak is not good enough. And so he set down this program of forest building, these oak forests and all the rules and regulations about what people can take and what they can't. And remember, in those days, one ship of the line, it takes 75 acres of oak trees to make one ship of the line. So but of course after Trafalgar or whatever, it takes 200 years for a tree, so we all moved to ironclads. So thank goodness because now those barrels are used for wine and whiskey. And of course we've been using them since Bruichladdich times. And I can remember when I first used French oak, and I was ridiculed by all the famous, talking heads in the whiskey industry. How dare you? This is abnormal. It's an aberration. This is. They're all doing it now. They're all doing it. But of course, I knew that French oak was used because my first job in the wine trade in 1980, my very first job in the wine trade was to bottle a Bordeaux wine in London, in the cellars in London, to bottle it, which we did. And then I remember addressing the barrels with a black marker pen to distilleries in Scotland. That's what used to happen. And by 1980, it had all come to an end. And this was the last time, the last era of London bottling. So I knew that these were being used as part of a program. Back in those days, they used anything, and of course, sherry barrels, sweet, dark, covered a multitude of sins. But wine barrels, everything was used, everything.
And just with the oak as well, in one of the differences between Scotland and Ireland is that you don't have to use oak. It says in technical files, such as oak.
But that's a cock up, isn't it?
Yeah,
they
definitely.
Specify oak
But Mark being the ultimate, let's give it a go. We got a few different casks. We got a mulberry, chestnut, wild cherry, acacia, and a few other ones I can't think of. But the reason oak is used is because the others leak badly.
So they're not very good, are they? They're not very good.
No.
We tried it just to see because we can, and you can see why oak was always used. Oak, without doubt, is and the French have used holly wood. They've used all sorts of other woods, but oak is the best without doubt. So I mean, anybody who comes to Waterford, you're very welcome to try.
Well, we need to ship over some of our red gum casks.
No, not eucalyptus. No,
not eucalyptus. Some red gum casks. So there's a number of Australian distillers now using red gum.
I don't know anything about it. But oak. I mean, oak it's been good enough. For 2,000 years, it's good enough for me. What we have done is we found oak in South America, out in Colombia. So you can imagine getting that out.
Sorry, was that oak or was that coke?
Yeah.
Oak. But that's precisely the problem. Deliveries are very erratic, I can tell you.
Actually, Luke, it would be easier to get a container of aforementioned powder than it would be to get casks.
But that's Quercus humboldti, and Quercus humboldti grows at altitude in the Andes, and it's the only oak variety in the whole of South America. So right up in that northwest corner, and bizarrely, that does have a strong influence of eucalyptoid, a sort of menthol, which is quite interesting. But we haven't got many, and we can't get many.
We got one which was very, very interesting, and when I contacted the supplier, it took me, I think, 2.5 years from the time I contacted him to actually get the load. And when we got the load and we started using it on the farms, I contacted him again, and I'm after contacting him about 4 or 5 times, and he hasn't got back to me. And not to cast aspersions on where it is, but I think, we were looking to play, as Mark would say, with a straight bat and get everything done properly. And I think, to get things done, maybe you had to grease wheels to move things along. And we were also in the middle of pandemics and the whole lot. But a very interesting cask, very interesting wood.
Not very well coopered, because they clearly don't have the skills. Hookhead.
Hookhead.
Yeah. Hookhead. Sorry, you go, Ned. Carry on.
I think Hookhead is a favourite for nearly everyone, and I would describe it as Waterford whiskey that's really, really drinkable. So some of the whiskies we do or have done can be a little bit challenging, and might be a glass. You'll have a glass or two, but with the Hookhead, you can drink the whole lot in a group. Maybe not on the one go.
That much left that I'm rationing out again.
and Hookhead is actually interesting. Just it's in Wexford. It's beside the oldest working lighthouse in the world. A farmer by the name of Martin Foley, and his son Pete has taken over now. And it's in the most idyllic settings you will see. If you go out to look up the terroir code of that and see it, like you throw your leg over the ditch and you're in the ocean. That's literally it. Like, you're literally in the ocean. It's that close to it. Like, and the lighthouse right beside it, and a really unique soil down there.
I'm just posting for everyone playing at home. I'm posting the Terroir.
The distillery is there, and that's Hookhead here, right down there. So it's the most exposed place you could possibly think of. It's surrounded by the sea. This whopping great lighthouse, historic lighthouse. It is windswept. It is storm blasted. It is the most extraordinary place to grow barley. But boy, does it produce something interesting.
Yeah. And the one other thing about it is, speaking to some of the Bournemouth agronomists over the years, and the farmers, it wouldn't be unusual to have this the barley white because of sea salt and stuff coming in. So it's always yellow, but in different times, depending on the direction of the wind and salt coming in off the sea, you could have barley that's actually more white than that typical golden, because of the influence of the sea. It's so close to it.
Yeah, wow.
And of course, a useless fact. The useless thing is if that's Hookhead, that's the village of Crook, and there is an understanding that when Oliver Cromwell attacked Waterford, remember Waterford was the most important city in Ireland back in the Middle Ages. If you took a map of Europe, the only city mentioned in the whole of Ireland would have been Waterford. It was a very,
arguably still is.
Yeah. And there's a saying that Cromwell sort of said, well, I'm going to have Waterford, whatever comes, whatever happens. But I'm not sure by which way we're going, whether we're going by hook or by crook.
So that's the saying, by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I need to remember that for the trivia.
It's probably bullshit. But it sounds good.
That sounds like a good story anyway.
That's historically supposed to be the story that's that's associated with Waterford history. Yeah, by hook or by crook.
Wow. Well, there you go.
Question I've got with the farm releases.
Well, that's another one there. Look, that's Banno Island. That's really the Hook Head is here. Banno Island, just there.
Yeah.
That's another amazing place. A sandy, islet. So you can imagine, the sand, that gives us, fruitiness. Whereas clay gives us sort of more clovey, spicy sort of flavors. It appears that we can deduce at the moment.
Am I just, because we were talking about salted barley and barley coming through, that's why. You're
getting a saltiness?
Am I now getting a saltiness
on Hook Head? I have, as far as I know, my taste notes, salted popcorn.
Right.
So the Hook Head has that salinity, but the other thing about it is we have inland farms that have salinity, and a lot of the reason is from the soil. You're actually taking your nutrition from the soil, so the saltiness, there's that salinity in the soil. So it will impact over time. It's not maybe this year's harvest. So what would have happened over time as well around the likes of Hook Head or Banno is land would have been reclaimed, and traditional methods of doing it in Ireland would have been using seaweed. So you'd get the seaweed off the beach, you'd bring them up in your donkey, and you'd start laying it on fields to help the nutrition and to bring the field to life as such. So that breaks down then over time. So that's part of the properties of the soils as well. So different soils will have salinity, and that will come through in the barley.
And Lois, wind blown, and stuff as well.
Crafty, you were going to ask a question there, Crafty.
A question on so vintage or harvest. So take, for example, Hook Head. Okay, so you released it 1 year, then you release it another year. Do you get substantial differences through vintage? Or you do?
Yeah, we'd say we'll take a few years harvest, right? 2018 was a terrible year for the farmers. So we had what was the beast from the east, where we had snow, we had rain. All the farms were late sowing. So normally between kind of the middle of February to the middle of March is when the harvest or the sowing would happen in the different areas. And then you're looking at the middle of August on for harvesting normally. But a lot of the farms in 2018 didn't actually sow until April. And then we had a heat wave, so the crop came in really early. Okay, so that was an unusual year, a very bad year for the farmer. So that's a totally different flavor result for that year. This year is a terrible year. This year is probably worse than 2018. In that proteins are very, very high. There's a lot of husk. There's a lot of disease. Like we're going to be struggling to get farms this year.
But that's to do with volumes. But quite often it's a bit like grapes. Grapes that come from very, very hot summers, short sort of fill. It's called fill. The fill when the grain fills. Short hot summers can produce very diverse flavors, whereas long cold summers produce different ones. And it's not to say that they're inferior. Quite often it's the other way around. So whilst we are moaning about yields in the fields and the amount of barley that's going to get rejected, we're not necessarily worried about what it's going to do for us when it comes to flavor, because it's sort of perversely the opposite way around. But this gives you an idea. That's 3 harvests, one farm, 3 harvests, 2016, 17, and 18. And you can see that, yeah, the profile's the same, but
with some
each
variation.
year has had slightly different thing. 2016 has produced more fruity flavors, more fresh fruit, more barnyard, more herbal. Whereas 2018 has given us more floral flavors. That's as you'd expect. 1 year, the nurture, the nature, the harvest, the growing conditions, it's never going to be the same, is it?
No,
It's
of
never
course
going to be,
not.
unless you had it in a greenhouse or something, but it's never going to be the same. So you're always going to get subtle differences. But the overall fingerprint, as you can see, from these 3 different terroir, you can see that they're, well, you could do if I could bloody get the thing to work. You can see that they are sorry.
No, advertising icons of whiskey.
You can see different fingerprints, different fingerprints.
Yeah. Fingerprints of each of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is what I keep saying. It's not rocket science. It's nature, and it gives us all these variables. So to go back to your point about hookhead from barley from 215 versus barley from 216 from barley 217. Yes, they're going to be subtly different. That's but they're still going to have the individual DNA of that terroir.
So with the
Chateau Latour isn't the same every year, is it? It's called a vintage.
Yeah, exactly.
The growing season was different, and the grapes were nurtured and nourished slightly differently.
So we touched on it earlier with accelerated aging. So Lord Smeg, curious to hear the opinion of Ned and Mark as men dedicated to their craft about industry-wide trends of people trying to cut corners through accelerated aging and other NAF tactics. I think with the finishing 2 words there, we know where Lord Smeg stands on this issue. Is there a place in the industry for accelerated aging?
Is there a place? It's always going to happen. It's always going to happen. People, think about it. If you can cut out 5-10 years, why not? To me, accelerated aging, I've discovered. I mean, learnt this first at Brocladdy, and obviously carried it through to Waterford. Is that if you use really good barley, if you use an extended fermentation, if you distill slowly, if you put it into decent wood, guess what? It matures or seems to mature earlier. In fact, I think it's the other way around. It's doing what it always would do. If you put it into shit wood, for reasons we described earlier, you're retarding the maturation of those flavor compounds. If you distill fast, you're getting volatility, you're getting thinness, but you're getting twice the volume or whatever. There's reasons why, industrial reasons. And so I suppose really what you're saying is artisanal approach versus an industrial approach. I unashamedly, I confess, I am a natural flavor seeker. I am interested in natural flavor. not artifice. I want the real. It's all there. I just want it to come out. And so the whole nature of what we're doing is to let it talk, let it do its thing. Now, an industrial distiller would say, well, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of money. That's a waste of, and they'd cut all that out. And then you get the smoke and mirrors of sort of lipstick on a pig. And, woo, don't look here, look over there. Fine. I understand that, that it's a different approach.
And it's funny, actually, because, one of the mottos at the distillery is low and slow. Take our time. There's no panic. Our distillation, when we're on heads or four shots, we're running at about 200 litres an hour, which, is a trickle. A trickle, when we're on heads, it's about 400 litres an hour. But actually, the long fermentation, the slow distillation, if you were to look at it in a farm batch, which for us is 75 tons of malted barley, is 8 brews, it only adds about a week, maybe a week, 10 days maybe. But if you think about it, then that gives us whiskey at 3 years old, which, in my opinion, equates to something that's much older. So by even just adding a week or 10 days to it, you're actually, that slowness, that taking your time, getting the real tight middle cut, the extra long fermentation, is actually saving you time at the maturation. If you think of it like that,
Exactly. Exactly. That's a very good way of putting it.
So it's a false economy. It's a false economy.
It's a false economy. It is. It's now, if you're looking to create volume to sell stock, that's fine. If that's something you're doing. But what we found is, by taking our time, by giving it that extra week, 10 days to slowly do the thing, put it through the process. When we get to 3-year-old or 4-year-old whiskey, it'll stand up to a much older.
Everybody tastes our stuff, thinks it's double the age, and that's because they've been exposed to these practices of which we've spoken. And this arbitrary 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's been drilled into everybody. I mean, particularly in America, but who says that sort of 9.5 is less good than 10? Or it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. But of course, it suits certain producers to emphasize that. Whereas we don't put the age statement on the front of the bottle. We want you. This is what you need to know. It's Irish single malt whiskey from Waterford, and this one's organic. All right, that's what you need to know. Irish single malt whiskey. It's whiskey made only from malted barley from a single distillery that's in Ireland, and it's called Waterford. That's what you need to know. Now, if you go to here, we've got the ingredients, and I believe we're the only people that do this. We dare to put the ingredients because we know there's no enzymes, there's no additives, colorings, flavorings, chips, essences. It is barley, yeast, and water. And we have the terroir code. You want to find out how old it is to the day? Well, it's all here. You want to know every barrel we've used? It's here. You want to know who made those barrels, where they came from, which cooperage, oak type? It's all here. So if you want to dive deep, it's on the terroir code. If you want to have some frivolity and some fun, it's on the terroir code. If you want to see the guys behind it, the guys that made it, the countryside, where that barley
Listen to the farm.
It's here. Yeah. So
do you think we need more regulation in labeling and marketing? Taking mezcal as an example, where you've got very strict rules as to whether it is artisanal or whether it's your industrial, and everything is on the label from a regulatory perspective. Is that the way that we need to be looking at things, or
Well, I mean, Christ, and there's enough regulation around, for everybody. I've always had the opinion. I mean, with Renegade rum, for example, rum you can make it anywhere in the world. Everybody's doing it. Molasses, blah, blah, blah. The only people that have got a proper regulation is the French, with Martinique and Guadeloupe, with an AOC. But you look at those AOC rules, and it's wonderfully Frenchly bureaucratic, and basically says you can do anything you want. So it's almost used. So we've made our own rules. This is how we think it should be done. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody else, but this is how we are doing it, right? And I think it's the same here with Waterford. This is what we believe. This is how we feel, and we're not saying everybody's got to do it, or of course not. I mean, each to their own. And remember, the vast majority of distilling is about a simple thing. It's the cheapest liter of alcohol possible. That's what they're going for. The cheapest liter possible. Because remember, until quite recently, most whiskey was destined for blending. It was never destined to be drunk on its own as a single malt. That's only something that's really happened in the last 20, 30 years. So the primary criteria was how to make the cheapest liter. Continuity, global barley, Ukrainian barley, high density fermentation, recycled barrels, all about the cheapest liter possible. And then they got caught with their trousers down when single malt took off. And it was like, oh, well, we'll just divert this from blending into bottle. And that's where we've got the problem today. Those big guys is, it's all being exposed. The bottle, the trousers down. That, hence the lipstick on a pig, hence the finishing, hence the all that. Don't worry about the barley. Look at the wood. You've heard it yourselves. 80% of a whiskey's flavor comes from the wood, they say. Well, that's absolute bollocks. If 80% of a whiskey's flavor came from the wood, why bother with barley? Why not just stick vodka in a barrel and you've got single malt whiskey at the other end? Of course not. Absurd. What is really relevant is what happens to those flavor compounds in the barrel. And yes, that is important. But to say that, but the flavor compounds aren't going anywhere. They're in the grain, they're in the new spirit, they're in the mature spirit. So 80% of a whiskey's flavor comes from the wood. No, I mean, give me a break. So you've got the industry itself. It doesn't know what it's saying, or rather, probably does, and is doing it to deflect away from what we've been discussing up to this point.
John Helton comments. Any comments on the rise of single pot still whiskey in Ireland?
Well, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what Ned has to say on this, but my feeling is pots. I take my hat off to Pernod Ricard, who during that sort of period of monopoly basically went, well, we're going to take this idea of pot still, an inanimate copper object, and turn it into a defining category of whiskey. You have to take your hat off, because of course single malt whiskey is in pot still. Scotch whiskey single malt is in pot still, and yet they've sort of they've managed to hijack this term for an inanimate object to refer to a type of spirit that is essentially a mixed mash bill of malted, unmalted, and other cereals. Fine, fine. It's been done to create an Irish only category. My personal feeling has always been that malted barley is the best, double distillation is the best, and that's what we want to do. But each to their own. I'm sure there's plenty of people who will go on. I mean, when I started at Waterford, I was assailed by one Irish journalist for not doing pot still whiskey. And well, it's my distillery. I don't want to do this. Let people do that. And of course, why have a mixed mash? What was the reasoning behind it? And there's all sorts of reasons given, rather romantic post-event ideas in my book. But I think, back in the day, it was any port in a storm. Whatever cereal was available, use it. And whatever's cheapest, use it. And of course, malting barley doubles the cost of the barley. So to use unmalted barley is saving you a lot of money. So you can see how, back in the day, well, we'll use a bit of malted barley where those natural enzymes will, help our unmalted barley. In other words, you're stretching it. And you can understand why, as an economic imperative. And I'm sure there's people that really enjoy that style. And, good for them. Green Spot and Middleton Rare. Some great whiskies, Redbreast. Sure. Lovely, absolutely lovely whiskies.
It is true. Like it's a category only for Ireland, so it was really well done. And I suppose what's been interesting over the last few years is discussion around, the definition of a single pot still whiskey. In that, I'm not exactly sure of the percentages, but I think you can use 15% other grains up to a maximum of 15%. And a lot of people have gone back to the history books and found examples of Irish pot still whiskey being made with 30% of this or corn and different things. So the 15% was probably what suited the people who wrote the technical file at the time. I won't get sued.
History is written by the victor.
No, but what's happening now at the moment actually is there's a good bit of conversation happening, and I think in fairness, people have listened to the distilleries that have started up and the people who are interested in the sector and said, listen, we'll look at it and we can come up with different terminologies and different categories and stuff. So there's a lot of talk going on at the moment about, we can open up the category a little bit more to have more percentage of other grains and stuff, which is very good because the people feel that they're being listened to and that it's going to be something that will probably help the sector as well,
Well, yeah, to be prevented from playing with mash bills. On the one hand, yes, here is the rule written by the rule writer, preventing people from doing other things. That doesn't seem fair at all.
I think that's probably where Australia has one up on you in that we've got a lot of flexibility in what we can do and how we can do it. There are, the basic rules, but within that, there's still a bit of wiggle room. So, excuse me. So, where do you think? Actually, sorry, I was thinking of a couple of different questions at the same time. In terms of the quintessentially Irish whiskey, your Jameson being triple distilled, and in general, when a punter thinks of an Irish whiskey, it is triple distilled. Prominently on the label of every Irish whiskey that you see, except for Waterford. Has there been a bit of pushback on that?
But that goes back again.
It does, all the way back.
Yeah. It's very interesting because you look at Scottish whiskey that was triple distilled, and if you look at a map, a historic map, the triple distilled whiskies were the ones around Glasgow, Auchentoshan and others. In fact, why?
Is that because they had shit barley?
Well, I think it was workforce demand. You had a lot of Irish workers in Glasgow. You all know about Celtic and Rangers, And so I think a lot of this was to make whiskey for working men that was, a pint and a chaser You wanted a whiskey that was light and easy to go with your pint. So I think it was a cultural thing. And it's noticeable that nowhere else in Scotland were they really bothering with triple distillation. I mean, we did a bit at Brookladdy just because we could, and just to try. And I think one or two other people, have done a similar thing.
Because when you talk about the cost of the whole process, the cost of
well, it adds a bit, but it's inconsequential.
Of the whole
it's inconsequential.
Inconsequential distillation.
It's an inconsequential difference in price. So it's not a price thing. It's a stylistic one. And in fact, I found an old 1695 account written by a chap imaginatively named Martin. And he set out on a journey from Skye, the Isle of Skye. So it's well worth reading. It's an interesting one. He set out from the Isle of Skye and traveling around, the Hebrides and stuff. And his observations are, frankly, jaw-dropping. But one of the things he came across was a whiskey called Tros Arrack, and another one called Ushgavarvol. And the first one, Tros Arrack, was triple distilled. The second one was quadruple distilled. It had the most fantastic definition, tasting note, which was more or less, that if any man should have more than a teaspoon, his knees will shake, his liver will fly, and he risks death. So we thought that we've got to give this a go. So we distilled both triple and then quadruple. So, as you know, a double distillation, you're taking roughly 30% alcohol, 8 or 9 to 30, 30 to 70. Triple is taking it from 70 to 80, and quadruple is taking it from 80 to 90. And we nearly blew the place up. Everything was shaking and rattling. And of course, Ushgavarvol translates to perilous whiskey. But interestingly, Tros Arrack, everybody thought it was a Gallic term, but it turns out that in fact it's not. It's Viking, Tros, the 3, and Arabic, Arak, for alcohol. So triple alcohol. Which of course is a whole nother story, is how did this Norse Arabic word end up in the Hebrides? And that comes back to a story we have on our website, where I theorize that the origins of a whiskey distillation in the west coast of Britain and Ireland perhaps was brought by the Vikings rather than by missionaries who sort of really turned up either 300 years before alcohol was actually invented, distillation, or 300 years after it was invented, i.e. the Crusades. But it's a very interesting subject, very interesting article about...
That's going to be our next conversation, I think, the origin.
Yeah.
Just on how we're perceived with the double distillation, that we also spelled whiskey without an E, and
controversial.
Controversial. It's the old way of spelling. In Ireland, you can, technical file says you can double or triple distill, and you can spell it with or without an E. But I was out one day in the work Jeep and getting some diesel in it, and a guy came over to me and said, "You're after spelling whiskey wrong on that." And so ensued probably a 15-minute. I'd like to call it a conversation, but he was trying to tell me for 15 minutes I was wrong. So I said to him, I actually had to go onto the website, I had to go onto the technical file, and he said, "Yeah, but that's still not the way to spell it." So like you can have all the things there you want, like, but again, it's a perception, like it's the no E is the old way of spelling. It's probably a little bit of I'd say it's a little bit of a play on us not adding color E158 to it as well, so there's no E in our whiskey. And I know the shooting the shit crowd. Do you have like might like that a bit of a grenade into the whole thing as well? But
love a grenade.
It's just because we're in rather than being maybe an Irish whiskey, we want to be seen as an international whiskey. In that, we're only using Irish barley, which this is my first whiskey job, believe it or not, right? Mark took a gamble to get me involved.
Which is hard to believe that you're doing all right.
Yeah, well, the farmers are doing all the work and that. But when I got involved in the whiskey, like I just assumed all Irish whiskey was made from Irish produce, naively. You know what I mean? And when I got involved, then you can use grains from anywhere, but it just has to be done on the island of Ireland. I was just assuming, like, why wouldn't you use Irish barley? Why wouldn't you use Irish grain? Like, so
it's the only reason. Well, the only reason I'm there in Ireland is because of the barley. I went there after a seminal conversation I had while at Brookladdy, sitting on the wall in front of the distillery one summer's evening, about now, harvest time. And I was with Duncan McGilvray, the late, great Duncan McGilvray, an absolute gentleman of a man. And he was our sort of head distillery guy there at the time. And there was some issue with the harvest. We were talking about it. And we're sitting on the wall looking out over Lochindole. And in the distance, you could see the north coast of Ireland, 30 miles away. And he said, no, Mark, he said, in all the years I've worked here, which was back to 1966, I think it was, he said, the best barley I've ever seen, the best, came from over there, from Ireland. And I put that away in the back of my mind. And so when I left Brookladdy in 2012, I thought, well, it's very simple. I'm going to go where the barley is best. It's the raw ingredient. It's where the flavor is. It's why we have, 212. It's why we have all that wonderful flavor. I'm going to go, and from that wall, if you take a compass and go and walk for 240 miles due south, you come to Waterford on the same latitude as Cambridge. It's a hell of a lot easier to grow barley down there. Glacial soils, maritime climate, ameliorated by the Gulf Stream. The sunny southeast corner, it's sunnier there than it is in the south of England. That's why I'm there. It's the origin of the whole whiskey thing. It's where the barley flavor is. And you start at the beginning, agricultural produce.
Well, on that note, this has been fascinating. We've hit the hour and a half, and I know, Ned, you've probably got some actual work to do.
I'm okay for the time being. It's coming up to 12:30, just after 12:30, and I'm doing a tasting tonight with a busload of Americans in Fate Lake House Hotel with Barry Chandler, actually, at 7 o'clock. So my day is going to be long, so there's no problem. The more time I have here, the less time I have to actually do something. Sorry, Mark.
Well, in that case, then we'll throw it open for some more questions.
When you see Barry Chandler, tell him that the podcast has been very popular. The Waterford podcast.
Oh yeah, Barry's a great fella. And he, like yourselves, he gets the whole ethos. Yeah. He understands it, and he packages it very well. Like he brings it together very well, and he brings people on a journey where, we're not talking to people. We're not pontificating about it. We're just, this is what we believe. Here's some of the examples. Talk to people in the industry, talk to the farmers, talk to the maltsters, and just get everyone's opinion. And then you form your own opinion. You might think it's still bullshit, or you might say, this is interesting. I might look into this a bit more. So Barry really, really, really helped us facilitate.
That's a very good point, Ned. The thing is, we're not trying to say that, this is Irish whiskey and this is what Irish whiskey should be. What we're saying is we believe that double distillation is the optimum, that malted barley has the most is the most flavoursome cereal in the world. And the best barley grows in Ireland. So that's why we're doing it there in Ireland. So I really feel that, I don't want, everybody's got their own, all the other people want to do, fine. Just leave me alone. Let me do our own thing. And, this is, I think you've got an international single malt whiskey sector that is rapidly developing. International. And I put us in that category. I put one or two Scottish distilleries in that category. These are owner distilleries, people that are distilling with a passion and a pride and a curiosity. What if? How about? Why not try this? And I think that is, and it's spread, to Germany, to France, to Sweden, to America, and like craft brewing. Whenever you've got a monopoly, it creates, green shoots, opportunity for something new to come up.
So what is your what's next? What's your what if? Where are you looking now? You've pretty well, you've proven terroir. You've got that under your belt. What's next? Where's the next focal point for you to showcase? What's the next showcase for you?
Well, it's not quite about what's next. It's more about are we right? Do people share this curiosity? We know that there's a vast majority of consumers are very used to being spoon-fed by big companies. That's why big companies get big, because they standardize the production. They and you've got to take your hat off. They do it awfully well. They want to have conformity, whereas we want the opposite. We want individuality. So fundamentally different approaches. And individuality, by definition, is more expensive. The yields growing older barley varieties, or biodynamically, the Arcadian way, the way things were done, or Irish peated barley with Irish peat. The latest two farms, Woodbrook and Lacken.
Sample.
We're up to sort of optimal level peating levels, but with Irish peat, which is totally different to Scottish. It's fibric peat. It's full of fibers and roots, and it's brown. It's less medicinal. It's less sort of petroleum. All these things, because we're curious. We would like to know. This has not been done for 100 years. This is what Irish whiskey used to taste like. Irish barley, Irish peat. Sure, there's peated Irish whiskies, but they're not Irish barley and they're not Irish peat. It's a curiosity. And then, of course, we can bottle it. This is what I love about what we're doing, is we can run with the hare, but we can hunt with the hounds. We can do both. Our ingredients are the single farms, and then Ned interprets those ingredients like a master chef into a cuvee. An assemblage of those terroir-derived flavors. That's the goal. These are ingredients, and the goal is to layer those terroir-defined flavors together. That's why we're doing it. We have to isolate those flavored terroirs first, so that we can then bring them together like a great chef to create that mindfuck of flavor, which I am after. So we can do both. We have the precision of provenance, precision of terroir, and then we have the creativity of the cuvee. I think it always makes me laugh is this. Here you go. Ooh, not that. That's my dog. Well, he does make me laugh. I've lost where I was looking to show. Oh, here you go. Yeah, there you go. Petrus, the mighty Petrus, grand vin, a statement of intent, grand vin. But what that grand vin means is it's been assembled from little wines. This is the big wine. It's been made from little wines, brought together, terroir defined, harvested separately, vinified separately, barreled separately, and then brought together creatively to create the big wine. That's what Big Ned is doing for us. He's creatively bringing these terroir components together. That's why we're doing it. So yes, we can have the wonderful individuality of these different farms and compare and contrast, which I love doing. You know, you try one and you're totally into it, and then you try another one and you go off in a slight sort of tangent. It's wonderful, and that's one way of engaging with Waterford. But then there's also the cuvées, and that's where things get really creative. So we have precision of terroir and we have the creativity of cuvée. We can do it both ways.
And there's fun involved in both.
Wow.
Yeah, with the peated ones, the new ones that are coming out. So the Fennis Court and the Ballybannon, they were 38 ppm, 47 ppm. Lacken, which is 57 ppm, I think.
Yeah.
And we've actually had a single farm release of non-peated whiskey for the French market of Lacken before. So even that as a comparison would be interesting.
Yeah.
And the other one then, Woodbrook, is actually up at 74 ppm.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a bit of and just an interesting fact on that, and where we on the terroir code, where you have Mark mentioned we get the sound of the farm. So Michael Carey was the farmer who grew this for us, but this actually batch was grown on rented land in South County Dublin. And when the guy who went out, the audiologist went out to record the sound of the farm, he contacted Mark Newton to say, there's no land here anymore. There's a housing estate being built.
Yeah. So he said, well, what do we do about the sound? And we said, well, you record it.
So if you listen to it, there's stages where there's heavy machinery reversing. You can hear the beep, beep, beep. I'm not 100% sure, but I think about 4 minutes in, 3 or 4 minutes in, you can actually, if you listen really closely, you can hear someone saying "fuck." So you won't hear a sound of that particular soil, but you'll hear what's happening to it at that particular time.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's about collars and cuffs matching.
Yeah. And just interesting. Then we have also done peated cuvée, which is a little bit interesting.
So how many farms go into that?
The 4. So there's 4 in that. So the Woodbrook, Lacken, Fennis Court, and Ballybannon. Yeah. So those 4. So I think the ppm on that averages out around 50 or 55 ppm. But that's really interesting. We called it Fumo, Mark, did we? Fumo, yeah. Fumo, yeah.
As in sumo.
So that's really interesting.
But I mean, Ned, can I ask you? I know Ballybannon. I know the Fennis Court. So it's 2 farms, 15 kilometers apart. Peated more or less the same way Irish peat. Now we've got, and we'll come back to those again, in the future. But we've also got Fennis Court. We've also got Lacken and Woodbrook, where we've slightly higher peated levels. And what was noticeable is the terroir is clearly identifiable. Cynics would say, "Oh well, your peat is going to dominate it. It'll all taste the same." Well, no, they don't. The terroir dominates the peat. The identity. You clearly got 4 different whiskies, and then with the peat on top. So when you're making the cuvee using those 4 farms, as opposed to the Waterford, which is what, 25 farms, you know?
20, yeah.
Describe, so I'd quite like to know. How did you work it? How did it?
Yeah, well, see, when as I said earlier, when I started this job, this is my first whiskey job, and I probably made the mistake of thinking that I was going to be learning at the feet of Mark, but Mark just said, "Fuck off and do it yourself."
It wasn't quite that. What he said
No.
the very first one, he said, Mark, what's Waterford meant to taste like? And I said, I don't know. It is what it is. You know, we're not trying to make it something specific. It's of the terroir. It is what it is.
But I thought I'd be learning at the feet of Mark, like, you know, rather than going after it myself. But I suppose with the peated cuvee, it's again, with any of the cuvées, it's trying to give a complexity and a balance, but that they all come together and give different layers. No more so than the peat gives different layers of flavor. That when we're looking for, say, the peated cuvee, it's to bring those 4 farms together in some harmony. And what I was a little bit nervous about with the peat when we started doing it first was that, you know, any of the peated whiskies I've tasted before, maybe apart from Octomore, was that it was peat up front, peat second, peat third. That's it, like, you know. But when we distilled our first peated farm, I was surprised that it was barley first. So peat is an ingredient in the spirit. So in the whiskies, you know the peat is there. You can smell it, you can taste it, but it's like an ingredient. It comes in different parts of a wave as such. So you still have the farm. So I wanted to try and keep that in the cuvee, that you couldn't necessarily taste individual farms, but you brought them together in such a way that you were brought on different journeys at different stages. And for me as well, I think I've said it to you before, guys, that whiskey is an atmospheric drink. You know, there's, you know, the 2,000 flavor compounds has been mentioned, and depending on who you're drinking with, how you're drinking it, whether you add the water, whether you've been out for a day with the dog, you've got wet, you've got given out to when you came home, you're sitting at the fire, you can get those heavier flavors and compounds. And when we talk about the peated as well, it's very interesting because we still stick to our same brewing, fermentation and distillation styles. So what you have is you have a spirit, a distilled light spirit. I think sometimes when people say they don't necessarily like peated whiskies, a lot of the guys who produce peated spirit actually have much wider cuts. They go a lot deeper into the cut points. They might go even, you know, down to the low 60s, where we this floating cut, and we'd probably cut up around 66 ABV, 65 and a half. We don't tend to go low. So you're still getting that very, very light spirit. So I think people will get a totally different understanding and flavor of the peated whiskies. And yeah, so when I was bringing it together, it's just to showcase the peat in just different levels, different layers. When you go back to it, then you can get, I didn't get this the first time, I didn't smell this the first time, you know. You know, and with it, like, it has when I smelt it first, I was surprised at how rich the sweetness was on the nose. I think that was the first thing, you know. And you know, it wasn't the bang of peat, and that it was kind of that rich sweetness. And you know, the peat did come in then, obviously, but there was also some kind of salty notes. You know, you had that, I think, wattle and daw kind of a nose as well. But it was just, you know, it's a sweet, unctuous, barbecue, heather honey kind of a style to it, like, you know.
And the peat, it comes from the same peat bog. So it's a blanket peat bog. So it's brown peat, very rooty, and it's got hence, you know, its name, fibric peat. So it's less decomposed for the Isla peat, which is sapric peat, which is one step away from coal. You know, it's you know, if more compression and it's coal. So you've got a very, very two totally different types of peat. And of course, the fibric peat is less medicinal. It's fruitier in flavor. So I think you got that on top of the spirit, which as Ned says, the Waterford spirit. We take a narrow middle cut. That's one of the things about distilling. I mean, I'm rather dismissively. I mean, I would say to people that distilling is the easy bit. Fermentation's the difficult bit. Distilling is schoolboy chemistry. It's how you separate alcohol from water. And the attitude really is, we know the spirit still is going to influence the weight of the spirit. The taller, the narrower, the purer, and the fruitier the spirit's going to be. Okay, that's a physical. We've known that for 100 years. Not a problem. But it's how you run the still. How greedy are you going to be? So how much spirit are you going to collect out of this? And of course, the more spirit you take, the thinner it's going to be. And the other is how much are you going to infringe on the impurities? Okay, you'll get more spirit. It will be cheaper as a result, but it's going to be less. And this is a literal less refined. So we take a 10-degree floating middle cut. We don't know where it's going to be. Each farm, each harvest is different. So we play what's in front of us. It's a floating middle cut. But I mean, to put that into figures, into numbers, we are leaving potentially, around about 75, 80,000 liters of spirit we could collect, but we choose not to because we want that purity. And we want to be able to say that you won't get a hangover if you drink this because we're not infringing on the impurities either side.
I'm going to have to test that.
A quick story on that was...
Put that on the label.
A quick story. Mark contacted me one Sunday morning to say, listen, Ned, he said, I've after been here with a farmer friend and we're after drinking a good bit of whiskey and, I haven't had a hangover on that. And he said, will you test it out? And I was thinking to myself, well, if you're after drinking it, if you don't know if you have a hangover or not, then I don't know. But yeah, we can't put it on the label, but I've tested it a little bit. And yeah, provided now you don't drink anything else with it, only the water whiskey, you should be okay. You should be okay.
Damn labeling.
Yeah.
Now, just to segue slightly, have you got any news on your Terroir? Where's that currently sitting at?
We planted in April. So it's a heritage variety called Schooner. And
what's that made from? Tell me about Schooner.
Schooner is
I put him on the spot. He's probably going to fuck it up now.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
Throw Crafty under the bus.
Schooner is a variety which was used in brewing, and over years it basically got farmed out because of improvements in other barleys.
But for beer.
Yep. And it's been, I don't know how long ago it was resurrected, but it's a heritage grain. It's used by a lot of craft brewers in Australia and a number of craft distillers. So I'm growing it in one location not far from the distillery, working with a local farmer. And where I get the Schooner from, Voyager Craft Malt, they're at a place called Riverina, which is... it's about probably 6 hours south of Sydney. So we'll have two locations, two very much different soils. Where I am, it's basically on the edge of an ancient inland sea. So there's a lot of limestone. And yeah, we're growing it. I mean, it's small, very, very small.
But why did you pick this? Why did you pick Schooner? What was the reason behind it?
Basically, because I'm using Schooner now, and to me, it's a very flavoursome barley. It's in whiskey. It's giving me the flavour that I'm after. So I just wanted to stick with that. And so we can compare Riverina, growing schooner, and Ralston, where I am. So
it's quite interesting because in Europe, the specification for brewing and the specification for distilling have been
different.
separated.
Yeah.
So you get varieties that are selected precisely for brewing or precisely for distilling. So it'd be quite interesting to see where you've got one that can swing both ways, so to speak. So it'd be quite interesting to see what that does. And when we did our heritage project, and we had this ability to help ourselves to the Chagas Ministry of Agriculture seed bank, which ones do you choose? So we did research ourselves, and of course the only criteria out there for these historic ones was the mention of the word flavor. So we went back and all the research we could find to try and find the word flavor, because yield is all very well, but we're interested in the flavor. So the ones we chose, the four, as Ned said earlier, going back to Spratt Archer, Goldthorpe, 1900, 1870, and obviously the original Old Irish landrace. The criteria was where we found the word flavor mentioned in texts, because that's the only thing we could go on. Okay, game changer varieties because of performance, but what about the flavor?
Now, circling back, we've had another comment come in from Ian. Thinking of peat, surely the different layers give it a variety of compound influences.
Yes and no. Yes and no. On Isla, for example, the peat is about 2 meters thick. So you have bedrock, and then you've got a centimeter of clay, from those glacial lakes, and then you've got 2 meters of peat. So the first meter on that layer of clay is black. When you cut it, it scoops. It looks like a chocolate mousse. It has the texture of chocolate mousse, and when you cut into it, it's slooshy. It's got an extraordinary evocative sound, and it's obviously very wet and has to be dried. The meter above it, well, then you're sort of going from black to light to brown to heather. So you can't use that. You can't use that top layer. That gets taken off, and the meter below it is taken out, and then the top layer is put back.
Yeah, right.
So, but in a blanket peat bog, well, then you have got depth, because a blanket peat bog can be 20, 30, 40 meters high, not deep. It's fun enough. It's the other way around. The peat bog is rising above the bogginess around it, which is why it's less decomposed and therefore more fibric, more rooty. So yes, on a blanket peat bog, you've got more depth to play with, as opposed to saffric peat, or certainly the peat on Isla. And of course, there's a lot of problems with the peat on Isla at the moment, with Diageo and their maltings at Port Ellen, restricting supply, more distilleries being built. There's almost twice as many as when I started Brookladdy. So there's a bit of a problem with peat. And of course, on top of it all, you've got the environmental extraction and sensitivities in an area of special scientific interest. So it's going to be, watch this space, because I think one or two whiskies on Isla are inevitably going to change in style as a consequence.
How do you balance the environmental impacts of whiskey production with obviously the economic side of things?
Yeah,
I mean, from my perspective, you've got obviously the growth and harvesting of the barley itself, the brewing process, which is I mean, there's a lot of CO2 coming off that. I don't know how well that's measured.
Yeah, it's inconsequential. It's to be meaningless.
Right. Okay.
But the environmental aspect,
Yeah. I mean,
Well, it's more to do with waste streams. It's more to do with waste streams. You've got two waste streams. You've got pot ale, which is what's left in the still after you've distilled, and dead yeast and stuff. Funnily enough, classified as a fish food, but if you put it undiluted into a water source, the biodynamic deficiency, the organic deficiency, is very high. Now, if you would need to be put in the old days, and this is a funny story. When we started Bruichladdich, we were there's a pipe beside the distillery, so the water was taken from a loch on the hill behind by pipe into the distillery, and then back into the burn after the distillery before it gets to the sea, and then an outflow that goes out 100 meters or so into the loch. And for 140 years, this was the method that Bruichladdich pot ale and wastewater was mixed and put back into nature. And when we started back in 2001, we got a visit from the Environment Protection Agency, and they said, "No, you can't do this." And we said, "Well, we're applying, for something that's been happening for 140 years." And they said, "Well, no, you can't. It will change the diversity, the biological diversity of the loch if you do. So we're not letting it." So instead, we had to tanker it, which is essentially tankering water away to the other side of the island, and to pour it down a specifically designed drain that goes underneath the Sound of Isla, where you've got this 12-knot, 8-knot current going backwards and forwards. So we had to pay to tanker water away to the other side of the island. It was ludicrous. But then after a few years, we heard that, in fact, the Environment Protection Agency had made a mistake, and the biodiversity of the loch had been affected by not putting our pot ale into the water. And all the oysters, all the mussels, all the scats had all fucked off. Because of course they were being fed warm, nutrient-rich water. So they'd all gathered, around the pier, and everything, and now they'd all gone. And so we were told, that if we were to reapply, that they would look more favourably at our application. But I mean that's well, as everybody knows, environment agencies, they knee jerk from one thing to another. There's very little, continuity of thought or trusting the people that have been there, farmers that have lived on these places all their lives. So anyhow, so pot ale, and then of course the other one is draff, and draff is the what's left over after the barley has had the sugar extracted. And traditionally that used to go to farmers to feed cattle. Now different things are being tried, different uses are being looked for with draff. And in our particular case, because at the heart of our distillery, we had this very unique mashing, well, not very unique, it's either unique or it isn't. This is unique. It's the world's only trilogy of kit at the heart of our mashing process, which turns the whole thing upside down, gives us this maximum terroir extraction and this maximum barley flavor in the bouquet. Because most mills that operate in the whiskey industry, the barley flavor stays in the mill. But we've got a hydro mill, the world's only one, where we mill anaerobically. Therefore, the aroma of barley you find in all our whiskies. It's the thing that stands out, from miles away, and that's thanks to this hydro mill. But we then, having turned the whole mashing process upside down, we don't percolate water through it. The water is with the barley already. We've milled the barley to 100%. So by then putting it through a pneumatic press, like the wine guys do, we can squeeze every last drop of terroir out of the barley. Yeah. But it also means our draft is like sawdust; it's bone dry, and so for farmers that's very attractive because you're not just shipping water away. But I think there's a lot of research going on to see what else can be done with draft, other uses of it. But that goes back to feed cows. So most of it gets recycled one way or another. And of course, the barley's coming from the end of the road. So
transport costs are pretty low.
Yeah. The other side of it as well is, I suppose, we're the biggest producer of biodynamic and organic whiskey in the world. And I think we for the peat we use about 50 tons for the peat, which is not a huge amount. And we're doing it for flavors. That's the way it would have been done 100 years ago. And obviously, there's a bit of talk going on in Ireland about peat and stuff, and whatever legislation is there, we'll comply with that. But I think the biodynamic and the organic amount of barley we're buying more than outputs the 50 tons of peat. I think this year we're probably going to do about 45% or 40% is going to be organic, our heritage, our biodynamic barley. Yeah,
well, it's what we call Arcadian. It's the old ways. So we're doing it for flavor. We're interested in it. There's a historical relevance. But extracting peat, yes, you're taking it from underground and then you're putting the top layer back. Fine. All right. Okay. There's a thing about emissions, burning peat. Some people say that that's not a good thing, But so domestic fires, that are frowned on in Ireland using peat. Whereas in Scotland, it's more about extraction. So you got two countries, side by side, and they can't agree as to which is the what the influence is of peat. But I think the scale is very, very small. And I think we've got a historical relevance there. We're not doing all our stuff peat, and we don't intend to do really any more. And then the organic and biodynamic, those were the ways that farming used to be. So really the full hat trick would be a whiskey that was biodynamically farmed, that and was peated. That would be the ultimate authentic
with the oak grown on premises as well.
Yeah, well,
set that up for 200 years in the future.
Not good. There's too many green tannins for using oak where we are. France is certainly better for that. Construction-wise, not a problem, but flavor-wise, a little bit too green. The tannin, too green the wood.
Just to give you a heads up, lads, I have about another 10 minutes, and I'll have to.
Yeah, absolutely. We were going to let you go half an hour ago, but you said you've got time. So.
Yeah. No. But I forgot Mark was on the Zoom as well.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I will open it up if there are any last-minute questions.
So, Crafty, do you want me to send you a terroir expert? We'll send you a terroir Waterford.
I believe so. Yes. In September.
Look after.
Because you've had James Cowan, our Waterford sales director, out with you there. How did that go, Crafty?
Yeah, no, that was good, mate. That was very, very good. There was a tasting one night. Which was very good. We got to try the peated as well. Yeah, and
I missed that.
No, you missed that. That was an
nice.
exceptionally good
Really
night.
good.
My personal favourite on the night was the Hunter.
Oh yeah.
I just found the flavour.
It's intriguing, isn't it? Yeah,
intriguing. Intriguing is the word.
But it shows you what we've lost, and that's the sad thing. We've wasted 50 years of that flavor evolution, and those flavor evolutions. I mean, Hunter. The interesting thing with his thing, that's the last direct connection with the land races, because he was experimenting with the land races, the naturally occurring variable barleys that had evolved within the terroirs of Ireland. So Hunter is an expression of that. It's the last direct link. So 1959, it was used for the best part of a decade. So you could argue that what stimulated the whole single malt whiskey boom in from the mid 80s onwards was those single malts distilled in the 60s. That's what did it. Distilleries that had been shut down, the stocks offloaded, but they would have been distilled with barley like the Hunter, ones that actually had more flavor, not the post-73 industrially researched varieties that we've all been obliged to use ever since. Now, people say, well, why use them? Well, it's very hard not to, because there is a committee that decides which varieties are recommended for the following year. And it's the big brewers, the big distillers are on that committee. And we're on it, but we get no say. And they look at they look at all the benefits that this new variety will have, and they recommend this for distilling, that for brewing. So inevitably, the seed merchants drop what they're doing and they propagate those new varieties. So it's a one-way ratchet. It's only ever going the way of the committee. So from year to year, whatever happened last year gets dropped, and this nice new shiny one is the one that gets propagated. So you physically can't get the old ones because no one's propagating them. That's why it becomes this one directional advancement. So unless
it's not advancement at all. We've had so Ian's piped in again saying not that much use in Australia, but draft can be mixed to have an organic way of gritting roads.
Yeah, we know what's used.
We end up with more dust.
and of course, pot ale and draft mixed. They're looking at various electrolysis mechanisms to try and create alternative fuel sources. So there's all sorts of research going on with those waste streams.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we've well exceeded our time. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Enjoy whiskey. Enjoy it. Whatever it is.
We have enjoyed immensely. And I'll greatly enjoy those samples that you're going to send over.
It was you, Ned.
I get Megan on it.
Yeah. Excellent. I've got her email. I'll flick her a message now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This will go up onto iTunes, Spotify, and all the rest of them in probably tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live. And again, Mark, Ned, a pleasure as always. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge and expertise. And
transparency.
Well, I mean, finally, this is what we put on the bottle. It's in the glass. Everything you need to know is on this bottle, and in the glass at the bottom, you will see our creed is, actually in the glass in the bottom.
I haven't got terroir traceability transparency
bottle yet.
Terroir traceability transparency is embossed on the bottom of the bottle.
Wow!
Awesome.
And I just want to say as well, thanks very much for your support, guys, over there. You're great followers, friends, and advocates of ours, and we really appreciate it as well.
Not a worry. Thank you for doing what you do.
And keep doing it.
Keep doing it, and we will be fans for many, many years. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to roll the outro for our sponsors. And, we'll catch you all on Thursday.
Thursday, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who it is, I've forgotten.
Double episode this week. Yay.
All right. Thanks.